Good day everyone, so I am the next reporter and my topic is all about publication style guide focusing on a sample. So what to expect? First is apply fundamental and technical rules in journalistic writing. Second is to convert wordy expressions into brief words. And last is to apply copy editing marks. So for our pre-discussion, the first question would be, what is the use of title in publication? What are the correct spelling to be used? How to use the quotations correctly in writing news? What is the use of numbers in publication? What are the words that used capitalization? And lastly, what is the appropriate punctuation to be used in a sentence? So the first one is the use of titles. The use of the word Miss. Some newspapers use Miss and Mr. in reference to mature man or woman, whether married or single. For example, Miss Maria Katigbak. Use Miss with the name of an unmarried woman unless another title is more appropriate. Some newspapers use Miss and Mr. in reference to mature the woman or the man, whether married or single. Avoid using long and cumbersome titles before a name. For example, instead of saying Chief of Police Jeremy Morales, let's say Jeremy, Chief of Police. Always capitalize a title when it precedes a name. For example, Superintendent Caballeros, or let's say P.T. Caballeros, Superintendent of Schools. In reference to a Catholic priest, Reverend Father Reynaldo Cabanillas. On second or succeeding references, use Reverend Cabanillas or Father Cabanillas. Avoid using a single initial. Use both initials or the first name. For example, D.Y. Caparas or Democrito Caparas. Do not just write D. Caparas because titles are spelled out when only the surname follow. Titles are abbreviated when used before a person's full name or before his first name's initial and his surname. For example, Prof. Romulo Buenviaje or Prof. R.T. Buenviaje or Professor Buenviaje. The titles Dr., Mr., and Mrs. are always abbreviated. Congressman is used with a person's surname as in Congressman Dorado. When the full name is given, use the abbreviated title Rep. Hermes Dorado. For example, Congressman Mangu Dadato or Kong Suharto Teng Mangu Dadato. And for the second one, we have the spelling. Avoid all abbreviations except a few standard ones that are understood by the average reader of your paper. For example, Wednesday, not W-E-D. Spell Monday, not M-O-N. In giving an exact date, spell out the names of months that have less than 5 letters. For example, June 15 or November 9. When the name of the month stands alone without a day, spell it out. For example, the war broke out in January, not in G-A-N. Spell out all Christian names such as Juan, Carlos, Roman instead of using abbreviations. Spell out the street, avenue when used with the name of the street. For example, 9th Street, Rizal Avenue, Port Area, Manila, or Purok Uno, Barangay Suben, President Quirino, Sultan Kudarat. Next is spell out fort, port, and mount. For example, Mount Pinatubo, Mount Apo, Fort Santiago, Port Area, and Mount Everest. Spell out the names of provinces and cities. For example, Tacorong City, Sultan Kudarat, and President Quirino, Sultan Kudarat. Avoid British spellings. For example, use color as in C-O-L-O-R, not color, C-O-L-O-U-R. Use the word organize, not organize. Hyphens should be chopped in nominative forms, particularly in verb preposition combinations such as clean up, get away, kick off, etc. However, there are exceptions like cast off, cave in, head on, and stand in. The third one would be the quotations. Quote the names of books, short stories, plays, songs, television programs, poems, motion pictures, and operas. Also capitalize the first word and other words in the title. For example, All the President's Men, The Old Man and the Sea, and Straight from the Shoulder. Do not quote the names of newspapers or yearbooks. Repeat the quotation marks at the beginning of each paragraph in a short story where a quotation from one person or book runs from one paragraph into the next. In a short story, when a quotation from one person or book flows from one paragraph to the next, use quotation marks at the beginning of each paragraph. In general, put the comma and the period inside the quotation marks whether the comma or the period belongs to the whole sentence or to the part quoted. For example, I am going home, comma, he said, or my fair lady. Place the question mark or the exclamation point inside the quotations. For example, have you seen the deer hunter? He asked, or have you been in town? When semicolon or a colon comes at the end of quoted matter, the mark or punctuation always goes outside the quotation marks. For the number 4, use of numbers. Never begin a sentence with a figure. If the numbers is the most important element in the sentence, then begin the sentence with the number but spell it out. A figure should never be used to start a statement. If the most important element in the phrase is a number, start the sentence with it but spell it out. For example, 93 persons were drowned. In the flood, 93 persons were drowned. The first example was spelled out while the second one was written in figure. Spell out numbers less than 10 except giving the hour of the day. Write 8 p.m. not 8 o'clock. In the statement of a definite sum of money, write 5 and the peso sign, not spelled 5 pesos. In the statement of ages, write the figure number 7 and not the spelled one. In stating the days of the month, write January 5, not January 5th. In expressing dimensions and measurements in which 2 or more units of measurement are mentioned, for example, he drove the distance in 5 hours, 20 minutes, 15 seconds. The closet is 9 feet by 15 feet. In expressing a series of numbers, we use 24 apples and 3 oranges. In the use of percentage and degrees, write 8% as in the figured one, 5 degrees above 0. In statistical or technical matter, spell out approximate numbers. Approximate means not precisely correct, nearly correct, or exact. For example, approximately 100 persons were present at the banquet. Approximately 100 pesos was collected. Spell out numbers of centuries. For example, 20th century, not the figured one. Use figures for sessions of Congress and of the legislature. For example, 47th Congress, not the spelled 47. Use figures for numbers of military bodies. For example, 121st Infantry Division or 4th Infantry Division. Use figures for all numbers of 10 or more, the usage of which is not governed by one of the preceding rules. For example, 19th century and 5th Street. Proceed to capitalization. The names of the days of the week, as in Monday, capital letter M. The names of the month, as in May, capital letter M. The names of centuries, 10th century, capital letter T. All proper names of persons, animals, objects, or place, just like Juan Carlos or Rizal Park, and all titles when they precede the name, Superintendent Juan Caballero and Captain Romeo Morales. The names of the streets, avenues, and boulevards, for example, Acacia Street, Rizal Avenue, Rojas Boulevard. The first word of a sentence, the first word of a complete line of poetry, and generally the first word after a colon. The principal words in the titles of the books, plays, lectures, stories, and etc. For example, The Man Without a Country. Capitalize the exact name of any club, association, fraternity, sorority, organization, school, bureau, library or branch library, school, church, company, society, league, union, scholastic organization, corporation, mine, mill, and bank. For example, National Press Club or St. John Early Learning Center Incorporated, PNB, like BDO, like that. Capitalize the references to school buildings or other buildings. For example, Claro M. Recto Building, PUP, and reference to administrative offices, for example, Principal's Office, and references to particular departments, for example, Manual Training Department, and capitalize the names of holidays and special weeks. For example, Independence Day, Holy Week, Rizal's Day, Bonifacio Day, and so on. Capitalize the names of races or nationalities, for example, Indian, Chinese, Americans, and names of basketball teams and other athletic clubs, for example, Barangay Ginebra, Pristo, and so on. Reference to the Bible or books of the Bible or the deity. Next is the reference to sessions of Congress or the legislature, to military bodies and political divisions, for example, 25th Congress, Liberal Party, Christian Democrats. Let's now proceed to the last one, the use of punctuation. The use of comma as described below. To set off proper name used in direct address, for example, you will get good grades, Miguel, when you earn them. To set off a title when it follows a name. Example, Mr. Bert Lavares, the chief of police, were retired on August 1. Comma joins two or more idea in a sentence. Use the comma to set off a dependent clause that comes at the beginning of a sentence. For example, when the clock strikes 12, the noon hour bells will ring. To set apart elements in our series, including use of a comma before and in separating the last two elements in series. For example, in the fruit basket were 2 oranges, 3 apples, and a dozen of bananas. When two adjectives modify the same noun, they should be set apart by a comma if they coordinate in thought. For example, Pedro proved to be a hardworking, conscientious student. To indicate separation between any sentence, elements that might be misinterpreted if read together without punctuation. For example, Mr. Silverio moved to Quezon City in 1945. Ever since, he has been running his own business. Outside, the house appeared sturdy and strong. Inside, the walls were crumbling. Use a semicolon as described below between clauses of a compound sentence that are joined by however, nevertheless, moreover, accordingly, in fact, and therefore. Example, millions of pesos have been spent in fertilizing the vast farmlands in the valley. However, fertilizing apparently has done nothing to increase the yield of corn per acre. Ordinarily, to separate two clauses of a compound sentence joined by and when the clauses are internally punctuated by commas. For example, members of the audience, children as well as adults, will be given a free illustrated booklet, and this booklet will contain a list of toys representing characters in the play. Semicolons separate elements in a series when one or more of those elements are internally punctuated by commas. For example, students serving on the committee are Lourdes Aquino, sophomore, Sahid Galang, junior, and Alice Sabili, freshman. Use a period after completing declarative or imperative sentence. For example, the first revolutionary newspaper to be printed in the Philippines was the La Solidaridad. Use a colon after a word, phrase, or sentence introducing a list or a long quotation or a summary of elements. For example, included in the will was a list of the assets of the corporation as follows. Use a question mark at the end of a direct inquiry but not at the end of an indirect question. For example, he asked, "Where did the man go?" Question mark follow a word or phrase intended as an inquiry. For example, the teacher was sure that something could be done to stimulate the interest of her student in their class. But what? For the summary of my report, the use of titles. Use Miss with the name of an unmarried woman unless another title is more appropriate. In first reference, it is preferable to use the woman's first name as well as the last. For the spelling, avoid all abbreviations except a few standard ones that are understood by the average reader of your paper, and post this list where copy readers and reporters will always find it available. Abide by the list and accept no other abbreviation. For quotations, quote the names of books, short stories, plays, songs, television programs, poems, motion pictures, and operas. Use of numbers. Never begin a sentence with a figure. If the number is the most important element in the sentence, then begin the sentence with the number but spell it out. For capitalization, observe the appropriate use of capital letters in a phrase or sentence. And last, the use of punctuations. Use the correct punctuation in a sentence to avoid misinterpretation.